Hi, today we're learning about comparing strings. So before we talk about comparing strings, first need to back up and talk about an expression. So what is an expression? Well, keep in mind that if you are working with if statements, you're always going to have if, and then you have your expression. So right here, the expression is int number 1 equals int number 2. And in Java, whenever you do this, you have to use two equal signs when you're comparing stuff. So right here, let's say we could have the value of 9 in int number 1, because this is a variable. We have the value of 9 in int number 2, and so if 9 equals 9, then do the following. Doesn't work the same way for strings. Keep in mind that a string variable contains text. It can also contain numbers, but it treats those numbers as text. You cannot compute strings. So if we had this right here, if strname1 equals strname2, we would run into a problem. This would not give us an accurate result. The reason for this is because string variables do not actually hold the data that should be in them. They hold the memory address that points to the data. For example, let's say you set strname1 equal to Mr. Crow. Well, strname1 doesn't actually have the text Mr. Crow in it. It has a memory address that points to the text Mr. Crow. So if you tried to compare this variable to this variable using this expression, it would be wrong because you're comparing memory addresses when you're dealing with string data types. So to solve this problem, to deal with this, we can use two methods. One is the equals method, and another is the compare to method. So let's look at this demo that we have right here. Notice the first thing that I do is I import my scanner class, because this is going to be a program for the command prompt. The next thing I do is I create my class name, crow3_036 compare strings demo. Then I've got my main method, and then I declare my variables. So I've got two string variables. One's called strname1, the other's called strname2. I create a keyboard object. A scanner object called keyboard. The next thing I do is I've got this question right here. I ask the user, what is the first name? I grab it using the scanner object in the next line method, and I put it into strname1. Then I ask the user, what's the second name? And I put that information into strname2. So I've got two string variables right here that have data in them now. Now, let's look at this code right here. If strname1 equals strname2, so if these two things are the same, then I'm going to print to the screen system.out.println strname1 and strname2 are the same, and if they're not the same, it's going to say strname1, strname2 are not the same. So let's go ahead and run this. Let's see what happens. All right, so what is the first name? Let's type in Crow. What's the second name? Crow. Crow and Crow are not the same. Really? Well, that's because strname1 is pointing to a memory address, strname2 is pointing to a different memory address, so they really are not the same. So here's what we have to do to make this work. Let me go ahead and comment this out. Let's do demo part 2. Oops. So now I can use this equals method. So if str1.equals strname2, then print the following. Let's say str1 and strname2 are the same. Else, we'll say that they aren't the same. So now if I run this, if I go run file, so what's the first name? Let's say Crow. What's the second name? Crow. Crow and Crow are the same. So now this works because I'm using this equals method that can compare two strings. Let me go ahead and comment this out. We'll go to the next part of the demo. So now I'm going to use this equals method, and I'm just going to compare it to a string of data. Instead of actually comparing it to a variable that has a string in it, strname2, I'm just going to compare it to the string Mr. Crow. So if strname1, that variable, whatever's in that variable, equals Mr. Crow, then I'm going to say, this and Mr. Crow are the same. If else, I'm going to say this, variable and Mr. Crow are not the same. So let's go ahead and run this. So what's the first name? Let's say Crow. What's the second name? Crow. Notice that this is not going to work because Crow and Mr. Crow are not the same. And I didn't even need to type anything right here. So let me just go ahead and try this again. Let's say run file. So what's the first name? Mr. Crow. So that's going to go into strname1. Doesn't matter what I do for strname2 because we're just comparing strname1 to this. So Mr. Crow and Mr. Crow are the same. Now we're going to go on to part 4. So there's another method that we can use, and this method is called the compare to method. And this method will actually determine if one string is larger than another string. So we've got strname1 compare to strname2, and if both strings are the same, then it's going to return a value of 0. The compare to method returns a value of 0 if both the strings are the same. If one string is longer or greater than another string, it's going to return a value that's positive. So right here I've got if strname1.compare to strname2. So if strname1 is longer than strname2, then it's going to return a positive value, and it's going to be greater than 0, and it's going to print strname1 is greater than this one. Else if strname1 compared to strname2 is less than 0, so if strname1 is not as long as strname2, then the compare to method is going to return a negative value, and this instruction right here is going to print. So let's go ahead and try this. So let's say if I type, what's the first name? Mr. Crow. What's the second name? If I type Crow. So my str1 variable should be greater than this one right here. So Mr. Crow is greater than Crow. Now, what happens if we compare Jen and Jan? Let's say two words that have the same number of letters. Well, this is rather interesting. Jen, Jan. Notice that Jen is greater than Jan. Why is that? Because both of them have 3 letters, right? Java uses what's called lexicographical comparison. And basically this is when you take a letter and assign it a number. For example, A is 1, B is 2, C is 3, D is 4, and E is 5. So what's greater, A or E? Well, you've got 1 and 5. A is 1 and E is 5. The E is greater. So in this instance, it looks at the lexicographical comparison between Jen and Jan, and of course Jen with that E, which is 5, is greater than the Jan because that A is only 1. So keep in mind that Java uses lexicographical comparison when it uses the compare to method. So let me go ahead and comment this out. We'll get to the last part of the demo here. So for part 5 of the demo, you can compare 2 strings of text, and you can tell Java to ignore the case. Because sometimes, especially if you're writing a program that's going to, compare, the password on file to the password you enter, sometimes you might not want it to be case sensitive. So in that case, Java has an equals ignore case, and there's also a compare to ignore case. And I'm providing this code out there on Tilde.info if you want to copy and paste it. So if I run the file now, and let's say I type Mr. Crow, all lowercase, and Mr. Crow, all uppercase, if I use the equals ignore case or the compare to ignore case, it's going to recognize both of those as being the same. So here's the equals ignore case, and here's the compare to ignore case. And that's why I have 2 of these right here. So let's do a quick review. Keep in mind that when you use string variables, you cannot compare them in an expression like this. You can't use that equals equals. You have to actually use a method called equals, or you can use the compare to method.